Today on The World Today, this historic mugshot of former U.S. President Donald Trump released after his arrest in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome back. The trio of Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali have reached a consensus to establish and enhance collaborative support regarding defense and security affairs. The deputy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Niger announced this, adding the Burkinabe and Malian ministers have all reiterated their country's solidarity in the face of sanctions imposed by Economic Community of West African States. Mr. Sidi says the three nations also chose to establish a structured platform for consultations aimed at effectively synchronizing their efforts to tackle the diverse array of situations and difficulties they will encounter. In the meantime, the military government has signed an order allowing fellow military governments of Mali and Burkina Faso to send their troops into the country to help defend against any attack. This announcement was made by coup leader General Abdurrahman Chiani after the foreign ministers of Burkina Faso and Mali visited him in Niamey. The West African regional bloc ECOWAS has threatened to use force to reinstate the democratically elected president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, who was deposed by a group of army officers just last month. It has been trying to negotiate with the coup leaders, but has warned it is ready to send troops if diplomacy fails. Meanwhile, the president of ECOWAS, Omar Touré, has been explaining ECOWAS's position, saying that it has not declared war on the people of Niger, nor is there any plan to invade the country. At a briefing in Abuja, Mr. Touré stressed that the three-year transition announced by the junta is unacceptable, asking the military to return to civilian rule as soon as possible. According to him, the regional body only activated a scale of sanctions, which include legitimate force, although they are hoping that all diplomatic efforts will yield positive action. The ECOWAS president stated that it is not too late for the military junta to reconsider, as the community will not condone any coup d'etat in the sub-region.
The situation in the Republic of Niger is particularly unfortunate, as it comes at a time the country is doing comparatively well in terms of security and economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, the ECOWAS security architecture, which has informed other security arrangements within and outside the region, is anchored on a number of instruments. These include the 1991 ECOWAS Declaration of Political Principles, the revised ECOWAS Treaty of 1993, the 1999 ECOWAS Protocol relating to the mechanism for conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping, and security, as well as the 2001 Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. The deployment of the ECOWAS standby force is provided for in the 1999 mechanism. Specifically, Article 25 expressively stipulates the conditions for the deployment of such a force. Among other conditions, the article provides that the force can be deployed in the event of an overthrow or an attempted overthrow of a democratically elected government. Furthermore, the Supplementary Act of 2012 also provides for sanctions to be invoked against members that fail to honor their obligations within the community. It also provides for the use of legitimate force in the restoration of constitutional order. The Republic of Niger is a signatory to all these regional instruments. Therefore, those who challenge the legality of the decision of ECOWAS heads of state and government need to do more research.
We continue in the United States, where former President Donald Trump has surrendered in Georgia on charges of plotting to overturn the state's 2020 election results. Thursday's arrest saw the first ever mugshot of Mr. Trump, a historic picture of the popular businessman. Mr. Trump had to pay a bail bond of $200,000 to be released from the Atlanta jail while he awaits trial. Afterwards, he described the case as a travesty of justice. It was his fourth arrest in 5 months in a criminal case, but this was his first police booking photo.
Brow furrowed, jaw clenched. Donald Trump appeared in his first ever mugshot. This came after he was booked on over a dozen felony counts at an Atlanta jail over attempts at overturning his 2020 presidential election defeat in Georgia. He wastes no time trying to turn it to his advantage. The image is now on his campaign website above a message asking for donations. He also posted the photo on X, formerly known as Twitter. The post appears to be his first on the social media site since his account was banned after the Capitol Hill riots on January the 6th. The ex-U.S. president, who is running for election in 2024, surrendered to Fulton County Jail on Thursday. He is part of a sprawling 19-person indictment that alleges violations of state racketeering laws, conspiracy, and false statements.
91 counts. Yes. Again and again and again.
His supporters arrived outside the jail to show their love for the former president, while other demonstrators urged that he be locked up. Mr. Trump agreed to post a $200,000 bond and accepted bail conditions that will bar him from threatening witnesses or his co-defendants. Before boarding his private plane at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport to go back to New Jersey, he repeated his claim that the prosecution for the Georgia case, along with other cases he faces, are politically motivated.
What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support. And that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have 3 other instances. It's election interference.
It's Trump's 4th indictment since leaving office. And he's the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges, even as he mounts another campaign for the White House in next year's elections. It appears that far from damaging his candidacy for the Republican Party nomination, however, the 4 cases filed against him have only bolstered his standing. He leads the Republican race to challenge Democratic President Joe Biden in the November 2024 election.
Joining us now is Maria Byrd, our Washington, D.C. correspondent. Hello, Maria.
Hello.
All right. U.S. politics at this time is in uncharted waters, but we've never seen a former U.S. president have this mugshot taking, facing criminal charges and arrests. How are Americans reacting to this Donald Trump's arrest, as he calls it, travesty?
The deep breath that you take, and as you ask that question, is exactly how most Americans feel. It is a very challenging time here in the U.S. to think that the 45th president has had a mugshot taken for criminal charges is unprecedented, as you stated. I think is not a shock for Americans based off of what has led up to this and the 4 other indictments. So it's not a shock relative to President Trump, but it's a shock as it relates to having a president go through this type of indictment and to have these type of charges for someone that the majority of Americans at that time entrusted with the safety, the livelihood, the future, and the operations of the United States, and to lead what we have held so dear as Americans is democracy, the democratic practice of the people being able to elect their leaders. I think this is a moment in American history that Americans are going to remember forever, but one that I think really allows Americans to see the importance of being able to elect elected officials that are going to represent the country not only during their tenure as president, but also in the days and years ahead. So this is
Yeah, go ahead.
This is just a very challenging time for Americans.
All right. But we're just curious to know, Maria, has Mr. Trump's legal woes in any way affected his candidacy for the Republican Party nomination? I mean, we understand he leads the Republican race against President Biden.
Yes, and so he still, as you mentioned, he does lead the Republican race as it relates to for the Republican Party. And there are still, obviously many other candidates that are Republicans that are potentially going to be the candidate if he is not able to run for office due to what could be considered if the charges and if he's convicted, they could be such that he's not able to actually secure the candidacy. And so at this time, it looks as if the Republican Party is in a position that it will be looking for that right candidate, especially as we're looking at what has been considered the mugshots and the challenges from former President Trump.
And talking about the mugshot, Maria, it looks like former President Donald Trump is actually somehow enjoying this because he even posted that mugshot on X, that's the social media platform. But what's next for him now after Thursday's booking?
Yes, as you stated, the mugshot was posted right there on Twitter X. And when you look at that mugshot, I mean, many people spent a lot of yesterday evening and earlier today just analyzing what he was thinking, what could have been going through his mind as he was taking that mugshot, and really understanding, as you said, what is next. Well, what is next is going to be those charges, and he will have to come back to court to go through the actual process. And if he is convicted, when you talk about racketeering, which is one of the charges that he's facing, that does have prison sentencing potentially. So depending on if those 13 charges and which of those 13 charges he's either exonerated of or convicted of will have an impact on whether or not he could potentially do jail time. If he does jail time and if he's convicted for some of these very serious charges that he's facing, we could see for the first time a president being incarcerated, and then obviously he would then be ineligible to run for office.
All right. Thank you very much, Maria Byrd, our Washington, D.C. correspondent, who will definitely be keeping tabs with that story.
Thank you.
Now to the weather. A fierce storm has left behind a trail of destruction in southern Michigan on Thursday night. In the aftermath of the storm, video footage showed damage of houses, power lines and vehicles in the Grand Rapids area. According to local reports, over 300,000 people were left without power. However, no injuries or casualties were reported.
Is it worth calling them and seeing?
And we head to Greece, where police had made 79 arson arrests over wildfires ravaging the country. Civil Protection Minister Vasilis Kekelias said that there had been several attempts by arsonists to start new fires on Mount Parnitha, which is northwest of Athens. The blaze is one of hundreds of the nation where wildfires have already killed at least 20 people this week. Summer wildfires are common in Greece, and scientists have linked the increasing frequency and the intensity of extreme weather events, including heat waves, to climate change. We'll shift gears now to politics in Taiwan, where the vice president is blaming China for the rising tension across the Taiwan Strait, echoing the voice of the international community. Speaking to reporters, the vice president, who is also the front-runner to become Taiwan's next president, William Lai, says the incumbent Tsai Ing-wen cannot run again after 2 terms in office, adding that the Taiwanese people would decide their next president themselves in an election scheduled for January next year.
Beijing's promotion of the one country, two system framework, we choose instead to stand united with global partners, following a principle of standing firm with exercising restraint, we will responsibly ensure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region.
Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi has held an online meeting with the International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi. The meeting is coming just one day after Japan released radioactive water from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. Mr. Hayashi emphasized Japan's stance to continue to ensure and prioritize the safety as well as provide scientific and transparent explanations to the public in Japan and in the international community.
Japan will continue to take all possible measures to ensure its safety. So we will also ensure, with the IAEA's continued involvement, that the discharge that adversely affect human health or environment would never happen. So we will continue to provide scientific and transparent explanations to the public, both in Japan and in the international community.
I think the fact that the process has started smoothly and the cooperation between the Japanese government and TEPCO, METI, and the IAEA has been smooth is quite remarkable. So it's the first step.
Meanwhile, not every Japanese citizen is happy with the release of the treated water into the Pacific Ocean. Over 100 people have gathered to protest in front of the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's official residence in Tokyo today. Demonstrators held placards, chanted slogans, and sang protest songs in unison to oppose the Fukushima water discharge. The move also prompted China to announce an immediate blanket ban on all aquatic products from Japan, saying that the Japanese government had not proved that the water discharged would be safe. Could it soon be easier to become a German citizen? Well, that's what the federal government in Germany is pushing for in the new legislation proposed this week. That reform has been long discussed and will make it easier for non-EU citizens to become naturalized.
Ganz offensichtlich hat man in Hamburg schon ziemlich viel rausgefunden. Man hat in Hamburg rausgefunden.
And for more, we are now being joined by DW's Cassandra Sund in the German capital, Berlin. Thank you very much for joining us. What is this new proposed law?
So this law comes as a part of a wide-ranging overhaul of Germany's immigration laws, and that overhaul is mainly aimed at encouraging more skilled workers to come to Germany and fill some labor gaps. But there are a few highlights in this new legislation. The first is that immigrants living in Germany for 5 years would be able to apply for citizenship. That's down from 8 years, that's what it takes now. And some folks with special achievements would be able to lessen that number even further to a mere 3 years. Another highlight is that children born to at least one parent who has been living legally in the country for 5 more years would automatically get German citizenship. And lastly, multiple citizenships would be allowed for more nationalities. That's a huge change since many residents here in Germany, even if they've been here for decades, don't want to give up their citizenships in their home countries.
But Cassandra, I mean, this is especially important for older immigrants who may be from the guest worker generation, who are also these people living in Germany. And what will be the reform and what will this mean for them?
That's right. So this quote-unquote guest worker generation came to West Germany in the 60s when the country desperately needed more people and labor to help the rapidly growing economy. Now, many of these guest workers were recruited for really menial industry-based jobs, and by far the most came from Turkey. At the moment, there are an estimated 3 million people of Turkish heritage living in Germany, and nearly half of them still have Turkish citizenship. That's because they would have to give up their Turkish passports in order to obtain a German one. Now, leaders from the Turkish-German community say that for many immigrants, these reforms would come too late, but they've added that it's still important and, quote, better late than never. And it's also expected that the descendants of these workers, those who are in the second or third generations, would feel more empowered because there has long been an identity dilemma, according to some leaders from the Turkish-German community. Now, one sign that the legislation is taking special consideration for these people who immigrated to Germany decades ago and have been working and living here ever since is that those over 67 would only have to pass an oral language exam as opposed to a written and oral language test.
Now, as you mentioned, this is just the proposed bill, and like any other bill, it will still have to pass through the German parliament. What are those in favor and those who are opposing saying right now?
So the Conservatives have long been opposed to loosening immigration laws. The one CDU leader, that's the center-right party here in Germany, has said that citizenship is, quote, very precious and should be treated carefully. Then there is the, of course, far-right anti-immigration party, the so-called Alternative for Germany. They warned against the government, quote-unquote, selling out citizenship. But supporters of the legislation say it's long overdue. For one, the reforms would bring Germany in line with other European countries. Looking at Sweden, for example, they had a naturalization rate of 8.6% of foreign-born folks in the year 2020. Germany that same year naturalized only 1.1% of foreigners. So there's this often talked about skilled worker shortage here in Germany. Proponents are hoping that this new law would also encourage workers to come to Germany and fill the massive shortages in the labor market. The idea being that talented workers have a lot of options because there's a global hunt for their talents. So these qualified and educated people would be more likely to move to a country where they don't have to wait nearly a decade to get all democratic rights. This new legislation is set to be debated in Parliament and could come into effect this fall.
All right. Thank you very much, DW's Cassandra Sund in Germany. Thanks for your time and your contribution on the World's Day. To other stories now, the Indian Space Research Organization has released footage of the moon rover of India's Chandrayaan-3 exploring the surface of the lunar South Pole after it's exited the spacecraft on Thursday. According to the Space Research Organization, the rover is expected to begin conducting experiments very soon. The spacecraft landed on the unexplored South Pole of the moon on Wednesday, making India the first country to achieve that feat just days after Russia's Luna 25 failed in a similar mission. The feat sparked widespread jubilation and celebration in the world's most populous country. And for the very first time, visually impaired individuals were treated to a cinematic experience like never before in the Lebanon city of Tripoli. And this is all thanks to the Trio Association for Arts and the Istanbuli Theatre, who made the project Cinema for All possible. They had the opportunity to attend a screening at a local movie theatre with a special audio description provided. Take a look.
Under the slogan Cinema for All, the Trio Association for Arts and the Istanbuli Theatre collaborated on launching a cinema week specifically for those with visual impairments. During the free event, attendees are able to enjoy a series of short films accompanied by audio descriptions at the Lebanese National Theatre in Tripoli. These audio descriptions serve as a narration that enabled blind individuals to follow and understand the unfolding of the film's events. Kasim Istanbuli, the visionary behind the National Theatre and the Tiro Association for the Arts, explains the importance of this endeavor.
It is an initiative to have films in audio description so that the blind people can enjoy the film and know about the events that take place. Unfortunately, we do not have lots of films with the features of audio descriptions, so we try to find films and work on films with sound descriptions so that all people can watch the cinema, which is the motto of the Lebanese National Theatre, that the cinema should be available to all.
For Ahmed Al-Shari, this initiative has motivated him and his colleagues to enjoy more movies, even though they can't see it.
It's the first time I attend a cinema, because usually I'm not excited about such a thing, because the film is with sound effects, which express the events without describing them through speech to help us understand what is happening. So we are not motivated to watch such a thing. But today, when they told us that there's a movie with an audio description for us as blind people, we felt that someone cares about us.
The event organizers say they want to give a symbolic step towards inclusivity and recognition for those with visual impairments, making the world of cinema more accessible to them.
And finally on the program, will you marry me? Well, that's not me asking, but a Slovakian man, Dominic Czerny, who bends down on one knee to pop the big question to the love of his life. The surprise marriage proposal took place at the finish line of the 35-kilometer race walk final, just after he completed his race at the World Athletics Championships. He waited until fellow Slovakian athletes Hanna Burzalova crossed the line in the women's race. Now the timing came just right as he seized the moment and that opportunity to get down on his knees to ask, will you marry me? Well, Czerny was pictured putting a ring on her finger, and the happy couple were seen hugging and, of course, kissing in the celebratory mode. In the race, Bulova finished 28th in the women's competition with a season's best, while Czerny came 19th with a personal best.
He saved me some seconds, I would say, that I was really fast at the end. And when I saw him, I couldn't hear anything, but I was just shocked and I was full of emotions, and yeah, it was really nice. Now when I'm thinking about it, it's more and more emotional, because at the time there was like really hard to absorb everything, but it's really emotional for me.
In that moment, I concentrate just to Hanka's eyes, and she was just the word for me. World for me, so I forgot about everything and was like in our bubble, emotion bubble, and when she said yes, I was like yes, and was life-changing.
Wow, these are the moments we live for. I mean, you can't say no to that kind of very intentional man, so congratulations to them. Well, this is where our own will end for today. And for this week, thank you so much for being with us throughout the week on The World Today. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm Anne Mwawadu.